On the last weekend of April, tens of thousands of Aussies marched in rallies against gender-based violence. Rallies were held across the country and organised by advocacy group What Were You Wearing Australia. Rally organisers had presented 5 demands that they wanted the government to commit to. These were the declaration of a national emergency, media regulations on the publishing of images of victims, mandatory victim blaming prevention training for frontline workers, alternative reporting options and specialist domestic violence courts, and improved funding. Organisers wanted a commitment.
I've been in contact with multiple government people that you work with and also your office, and they told me that the government's plan is to just talk about the national plan to end violence against women. I'm sorry, but we don't have 10 years. And when we say take immediate action, we don't mean in 10 years' time with the national plan. We mean not in a year or a month. We mean today at 2 p.m. I'm expecting at 2 p.m. you were to come up to me and let me know what is that commitment that you and the government will be making today, because telling me about the national plan that I already know about, I'm sorry, it's not enough. Things that are already in place are clearly not doing enough because we still are losing women day in and day out. I'm also told that someone in the government wants to speak about the national cabinet meeting and how that's going to do a lot of change. I'm sorry, but that's not going to do anything.
They wanted immediate action, not the empty platitudes we've all heard before. They didn't want to hear about a previously announced 10-year plan or a national cabinet meeting held behind closed doors, because they know what the data says.
So far this year, 32 women have been killed in Australia, with 27 of those allegedly at the hands of a current or former partner.
And they know what waiting means. That's why they're after immediate action and commitment. Unfortunately, it looks like the intent of the rallies will be overshadowed by events in Canberra. I guess that is, unless you subscribe to the any publicity is good publicity theory. But let's take a deep breath and break it down, because I've seen some absolute horse shit online in relation to that Sunday's events. For many, the lasting image will no doubt be this one. Politicians are all about optics, and the optics on this, they're not great. Unfortunately, the Labor faithful's way of dealing with the fact that their leader has come away from all this looking like he's just delivered his own Scott Morrison moment has generally been to pile on to a young person who appears to be trying to make a positive change, with some of the most disgusting commentary I've seen online for quite a while. Absolute shameful shite. Some of the hardcore Labor stands have even engaged full-on cooker conspiracy mode. There's been a lot of people trawling through anything and everything to try and find the smoking gun on the grassy knoll, just to spare Anthony Albanese his blushes. Whatever is eventually dug up, because let's face it, when people go digging, there's almost always something dug up. It won't change what happened on that Sunday. It won't change the fact that tens of thousands of Australians marched for action. If you're genuinely interested and actually want to watch the full rally unedited, you can find the video online, but still this only really tells part of the story. I've seen people posting this as if it was some sort of Machiavellian plot, but what does it say? Albanese will be at the Canberra rally. I mean, yeah, that's what he said he was going to do. I'm not sure exactly what that proved. You know what it doesn't say? It doesn't say that he'll be speaking. And what we do know is that the government weren't on the speakers list because Senator Katie Gallagher has said so.
We'd been working with the organisers about an opportunity to speak. We weren't on the speakers list, and we weren't able to land that by the time the rally started. And and then when we were at the rally, I think the rally expected to hear from their Prime Minister, so he stood up and spoke.
Respect is quite important in this, and there's been some confusion and concern about that. Was he given an invitation to speak?
I'm not aware of an invitation for the government to speak. I had wanted to speak. It was a rally in my hometown, and I thought that was appropriate. But there was some concern about the demand, the 5 key asks that were being sought at that rally, and, a commitment that they were seeking from us, and we weren't able to reach agreement on how to proceed. So in the end, we decided to just walk and attend the rally, and as a sign of respect and as a sign of solidarity with women around the country.
Senator Gallagher has made it clear there that the government were unwilling to commit to the organisers' 5 demands. Therefore, they weren't going to speak. They'd attend and walk instead. It's pretty simple. And taking what she said at face value, there had been discussions with organisers in the lead-up, but they'd clearly been unable to agree to terms, therefore the government weren't on the speakers list. Having that background suddenly puts all the little smoking gun clips like these into some context, doesn't it?
I don't like being vulnerable. but nothing's going to happen today. And I'm so fucking scared because I'm going to have to go over there now and ask for change, and nothing's going to happen, to be realistic and honest with everyone. And they're not going to commit anything, and I'm just going to look like this biggest idiot asking them to do all these different things, and they're going to be like no, or just ignore me. I've already been told not to say anything about them or ask them to do anything. I'm going to do it anyways. It's pretty fucking scary. Just want to be transparent. Just to be completely transparent, if you've come here today for the Prime Minister because of him coming, and you're not here for the cause, please don't continue marching. This cause is about men's violence against women. It's not about the Prime Minister being here and getting to meet him.
I'll pause here for a second. To be honest, I debated whether or not to include a lot of this who said what stuff. Because for one, I think it has distracted from the main issue. And two, I don't think who said what on the day really matters. What really matters is the action coming from the government as a result of these rallies. And on that front, I think the government have been found sorely lacking. In a perverse way, the distraction that this has all caused has let the government off the hook to a certain extent, which I think will become clearer once we look at the outcome of National Cabinet. But at the same time this happened, people are talking about it. And a lot of people seem to be piling on Sarah Williams as if it's a national sport. This is someone who had the courage to help organise what was a nationwide event and to share a deeply personal and painful story on a national stage. I just don't think that the pile-on is fair or called for. So if this video causes people to sit back and engage their brains and to toggle on their empathy circuits for 5 minutes, then it's done its job. I'm a bit surprised about some of the commentary around the rally, to be honest. Especially from Labor people, who should be no strangers to rallies. Unions run rallies pretty frequently, and the purpose of those rallies is usually to drive action and change. It's kind of the point. I'd be surprised if Albo hadn't made demands at a rally himself before.
Children throwing rocks with helicopter gunships, with tanks and with missiles.
Anyway, you can see in the live stream the demands were read one by one. After each demand, Sarah Williams asked the members of the government in attendance for a thumbs up if they supported and would commit to them, or a thumbs down if they didn't.
48 hours media has to wait before posting a victim's face on social media without consent. Can we start that chat about locking that in the next 3 months? No, guys, I know you're good for it. We have a yes or a no, thumbs in the air if it's a yes. 100% okay to not respond at all. Number 2, no response.
There's a lot of brave people here. Be brave.
I'm sorry.
There was no response from the politicians, as I'm guessing organisers would have expected, given their prior dealings with the government. There was really no call for the Prime Minister to stand up and take centre stage. After failing to meet any of the demands, there was heckling in the crowd and people wanted to know what the government would commit to. It's at that moment Albo and his entourage stood up and stepped forward, positioning themselves behind the microphone.
What I heard a lot last year was that if we don't start seeing things as a potential for a Peter Dutton in Prime Minister next year, and we don't want that. But we gave the opportunity to Anthony Albanese to make comment today, and we didn't get any. I don't want Peter Dutton, please, Lord. But now we know our answer. I don't know what the action is there. Someone's got it. We'll talk to them later.
Minority government, that's what it looks like.
Come on!
I want to say something though before any of these people speak. I'm going to take the microphone just in case. Other people, before anyone speaks, I do want to say I'm doing this respectfully. People are going to think I'm not. People aren't going to like it. Who gives a hell, really? I'm doing this for victim survivors and the women that no longer can speak in this country anymore. And I know that I'm going to leave this. There's going to be people who don't like it. But I hope everyone that is a victim survivor has my back in this, because this isn't okay. We don't have to please people who have a duty of care to look after us. A duty of care to make sure that not tomorrow, not the next day, not ever, we never lose another woman again. actually, to be honest, don't really want anyone to speak because I don't think they should be given the microphone. And I do think that it's going to be just the shit Sarah show, and I'm going to become the next Brittany Higgins. And I'm not looking for anyone to become that. I'm happy for my What Were You Wearing team to talk with the ministers, hear what they have to say, and then we'll consider the decision of them speaking about 10 minutes. But I'm not having any attacks towards myself or the organisation.
Ms Williams did say she didn't want them to speak, but not many people seem to have stopped to wonder why. If the pollies wanted their moment in the spotlight, the organisers wanted them to make some actual commitments. If you want your photo op, commit to action. And we know that had been the sticking point about having the government speak, because that's what Katie Gallagher has pointed out on radio. As soon as Albanese is up front though, that's when things start to get messy. The crowd starts to get restless and there is an expectation that he'll speak. The crowd, mind you, without the benefit of the context that we have. Before I go on, I just want to read something from Annabelle Crabb that sums up a lot of what I wanted to say, but in a much nicer way. When the group reached Parliament House, Ms Williams told her story. A truly harrowing one of violence, fear, rape, flight and homelessness. To our nation's shame, hers is not a rare story. What is rare, however, is for someone so young to find so quickly, deep inside herself, in that broken place, the fortitude to convert her own pain into action for others. And before another single word is said, it needs to be recognised that hardly anyone to whom such dreadful things have happened can do this. No one should be expected to do it, or thought less courageous or heroic when they can't. And when they do, the last thing any of us should expect is that they'll be perfect at it. Full stop. Honestly, I think that's really well put. Now, hindsight is a wonderful thing, and it's really easy to critique something from the comfort of my basement covered in Dorito crumbs, but I think it should be okay to say that perhaps the rally could have used a more articulate and experienced MC. That's going to sound like a criticism, but honestly, it's not meant that way. I could never do what Sarah did. I absolutely dread speaking in public. I just can't imagine it, let alone on that sort of stage, sharing something deeply personal and painful. All the respect in the world for being able to do that. And organising any event is stressful, but marshalling an event with national attention and the Prime Minister hanging off the periphery is even more so, I'd imagine. When I see these smoking gun clips that people have been sharing online, I see a young person trying to do their best with limited experience in emceeing an event of this scale. Maybe there's something wrong with me, but I don't see a Liberal Party plant. I'm not seeing an actor. I'm not getting any of that. I just see a young person trying to do their best in a very stressful situation. For the record, based on her interview with Sky News, I think it's highly unlikely that she's angling for a job there.
Okay, we don't seek to stifle anyone. That's why you were invited on today. If those people want to talk to Sky News tomorrow, they're welcome as well. By the way, if you want to contact anyone at Sky, and they're welcome to do that as well.
And people may have chosen to overlook it, but she's also been less than complimentary about Peter Dutton as well.
I also want to make it known as well, I grew up in a very Labor household, you guys. I actually really liked you guys back in the day, So I don't want you to think I'm like, anti-Labor. That if we don't start seeing things as a potential for a Peter Dutton in Prime Minister next year, and we don't want that. I don't want Peter Dutton, please, Lord.
So I don't think any of these claims really hold water. A more experienced MC or speaker may have been able to control the situation a little better, rather than goading or provoking a response from the Prime Minister, which is essentially what ended up happening. A more experienced MC could have acknowledged that the PM and members of his government were in attendance and thanked them, which, to be fair, Ms Williams had done.
I've had the immense pressure of how I respond and speak today. I want to thank the government and the people who've come, Anthony Albanese, Katie Gallagher. I know there's a bunch.
A more experienced MC could have acknowledged that organisers had been in contact with the government to seek the government's commitment to the 5 demands and immediate action. They could have stated that the government had been unwilling to commit to any of the rally's demands nor immediate action, and therefore members of the government were not on the speakers list. A more experienced MC could have said that the government had wanted to speak about their 10-year action plan and about a national cabinet meeting, but that the organisers did not want to hear about what's already in place, because it's clear that what's already in place is not working. And it's worth pointing out here that all of this would appear to be true, based on the accounts of both Senator Katie Gallagher and the event organisers. A more experienced MC could have said that as the government were unwilling to commit to immediate action, the organisers were unwilling to provide them with a platform for their photo opportunity. That's far from perfect either, but from what I've seen of Sunday's event, the way it went down gave the PM the chance to come forward before the scene had been set. Once he'd taken himself up there, it was too late and control of the situation had been lost. Perhaps the mistake was engaging with the Prime Minister directly, to almost force a response, and maybe that could have been avoided. To be fair, it sounds like someone had given Ms Williams that advice earlier as well.
I've already been told not to say anything about them or ask them to do anything. I'm going to do it anyways. It's pretty scary. Just want to be transparent. I've had the immense pressure of how I respond and speak today.
And maybe we just chalk up the fact she didn't take that advice to the exuberance of youth. Anyway, the PM was clearly not a fan of what he'd been hearing. That is, if he could hear anything above the sound of his teeth grinding.
But we gave the opportunity to Anthony Albanese to make comment today. And we didn't get any.
He decided he would speak, to the applause of some, booing of others.
On that Sunday, as the crowd got restless, Ms Williams asked the crowd if they wanted to hear from the PM. They did.
I don't think that was going to happen.
Speaking or not speaking?
Ms Williams has accused the PM of saying this.
You've said, or there's an allegation the Prime Minister said in response to all of these calls, I'm the Prime Minister, I run this country. He said he didn't say this. Do you stand by? Are they the exact words he said?
Yes, those exact words he said, but I've not been told that he hasn't said he didn't say it. I've been told he's avoided the questions all day. He said that whilst I asked everyone if we wanted him to speak, and there was about 20 or so people behind that heard him say it.
So did he say that exactly? Well, he definitely said the first part, which popped up a day later.
I'm happy from my Robbie Ryan team to talk with the ministers, hear what they have to say, and then we'll consider the decision of them speaking about 10 minutes.
The second part, if it was said, hasn't surfaced, but it probably goes without saying that just because it wasn't captured on camera, that's not necessarily evidence that it wasn't said. It's also worth pointing out that Albo has been asked specifically about this and has had ample opportunity to deny or clarify things, and he's chosen not to.
Sarah Williams has claimed you lied to the nation. What's your response?
Oh, look, good on Sarah for organising the rally yesterday. I'm not going to get into, that sort of debate.
And we know it's unfortunate, but you could put it to bed now.
Well, Nat, people, including Channel 7, were there for the recording of everything that went on. So you were all there. So the media were all around. They heard everything that was said. There.
PM, we'll get to the National Cabinet meeting and what you're hoping to achieve. Just going back, those words from Sarah Williams, I'm the Prime Minister, I run this country, if they were said, do you regret it?
Well, you've got the footage. You've got the footage which was there. So I wish Sarah well.
I mean, you can put it to bed now, and whether it was said.
Well, I just have you were there. Channel 7 were there. They were there on the spot, as was every other media organisation.
Okay.
I'm sure people will make of that what they will, depending on the colour of their t-shirt. But does it even matter? Not really. What is obvious is that the PM let his frustration bubble over at a rally demanding action to prevent violence against women. The redundant "I'm the Prime Minister" was said, and that, along with the body language throughout, was bad enough in my opinion. When the Prime Minister steps forward and is handed the microphone, things are okay for all of about 10 seconds until he says this.
To be clear, we did ask to speak, myself and Katie, and were told that that wasn't possible, and that's fine. I respect the organisers' right to do that.
That's a full-out lie.
To do that.
For me, there are a couple of possible options here as to why he went down this path. Either he's telling a porky here to save face and maybe square up a little, or his army of advisors failed to mention that the organisers had been in touch with the government. Maybe Albo's best defence is an argument in semantics, but it was made clear by Katie Gallagher that there had been talks with organisers, but they were unable to come to terms because the government weren't comfortable with making commitments. The most generous opinion I can offer here is that I think the PM's comments were largely unnecessary. Now for the moment that'll follow him around for months, if not pop up during the next election campaign.
And that governments of all levels must do better, including my own, including every state and territory government.
I just can't see any way in which either Albanese or Gallagher did not notice the distressed person standing a few feet away from them. He pauses and he looks right at her. It's pretty clear. At that point, there were many different paths he could have taken. He opted to put his head down and plough on. Look, maybe it's time the PM called in ScoMo's old empathy consultant. In his rush to prove that he wasn't Scott Morrison and he wouldn't be hiding away in his office, Albanese delivered a moment every bit as cringeworthy as anything Morrison had dished up when he was PM. There was a brief moment there where Albanese almost seemed to have forgotten that he was now the leader of the country and not the rallying elbow of the olden days.
We're here today to demand that governments of all levels must do better, including my own, including every state and territory government.
He kind of hit on one of the big reasons why the rally had been necessary in the first place.
We now have 10 days paid domestic. I agree it's not enough. I said that. We need to do more. We have...
And if he'd stuck around for the other speakers, he might have been even more enlightened.
We march to call the government to action, to commit to more than just money, but the cultural and systemic change needed to end violence against women. We do not want to keep asking the government, how many more women will it take before you commit to action? The time to commit to action, the time to act is now. The time to end violence against women is now.
The PM ran through everything you'd have expected. There was the motherhood statements about doing better. There was the reference to National Cabinet. There was running through the dot point list of achievements.
In the time that we have been in government, we've allocated funding for 500 domestic violence workers.
On the frontline workers, Labor did promise before the election 500 domestic violence workers. How many have been delivered?
Well, not as many as we would like. I think the last numbers I saw was around 30.
I admit I laugh-cried when I heard him name-check the Housing Australia Future Fund.
And we have access to housing through our Housing Australia Future Fund.
There were moments of frustration. At least Katie Gallagher read the room when offered the mic. And with that, the PM and his entourage were off, and many in the media followed, as if to underline the fact that, like it or not, this had become all about him. Any positive message he was trying to convey was lost through his own actions. He made it about him when he took centre stage. He made it about him when he took the microphone. He made it about him when he ignored someone in distress and carried on promoting his achievements. Of course, Albo could have avoided the kerfuffle had he taken a leaf out of the New South Wales Premier's book.
The Premier of New South Wales was in the crowd at Hyde Park.
Just here to listen.
Sure, on the day, in that moment, you can argue that there were faults on both sides, and you're welcome to take that path if you choose. But what I will say is this. Of the two parties involved, I think it's reasonable to expect more of the Prime Minister, of a career politician, of someone with 40 years' experience who has no doubt been media trained to within an inch of his life, and who has a small army, 11 at last count, of media advisors at his disposal. The power imbalance here should be immediately obvious. In a turn of events that left me scratching my head, I found myself agreeing with some of what Senator Jane Hume was saying.
Regarding the rally the Prime Minister attended here in Canberra over the weekend, did he misread it, or was there some breakdown in communication, do you think, around whether Katie Gallagher was or was not to speak?
I don't know what the logistics were that surrounded that rally, but what was very clear is that women that attended that rally, and indeed women right around Australia, are angry, and they're angry because they're frightened. When you're dealing with somebody that's frightened, whether it be an individual or a group, there has to be a level of not just empathy and understanding, but also patience. Allow them to speak. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to do the speaking.
And you think that patience was lacking?
Yes, I think that opportunity to get up and say what the government is doing is terrific was mistimed and misjudged. Quite frankly, there is good work that is being done in this space, but this is not the time to crow about the good work that's being done. This is a time to demonstrate that you understand the problem and will work towards dealing with those fears of women.
But then we come to Wednesday's National Cabinet, and it was everything cynics like me could have expected. It was a big sounding announcement that sounded great as a headline, but quickly disappointed as soon as he scratched away at it a little.
So today we can announce the government will invest $925 million over 5 years will be included in the budget in 2 weeks' time to permanently establish the Leaving Violence program so that those escaping violence can receive financial support, safety assessments and referrals to support pathways. Those eligible will be able to access up to $5,000 in financial support along with referral services, risk assessments and safety planning.
Apparently the Albanese government have reached the recycling phase of their term. The big announcement was nothing more than the extension of a Scott Morrison era policy. They're extending something that's already in place. Oh yeah, and the $5,000, it's actually $1,500 plus $3,500 in services, if you can get into them. Essentially, the big announcement from National Cabinet was to maintain the status quo. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, to qualify, people have to apply and jump through a series of hoops. And then it's been reported that under half the applications are accepted. The application process itself can be a traumatic experience, which the Prime Minister would have learned had he stuck around to listen to the remaining speakers.
If you are giving out payments, that's excellent. You need to understand how traumatic it is for a person experiencing DFV to fill out massive forms to prove that you are actually a victim.
Yes!
At this rate, the government are going to put the chaser out of business. The fact that this isn't parody and it's really just a straight headline is one of the many reasons people are justifiably angry. While we're at it, let's have a quick look at what Labor had to say about the Coalition's Escaping Violence program 3 years ago, the program that Labor are now extending from 2025. Labor Senator Jenny McAllister said the government needed to listen to those at the coalface, given the seriousness of the issue at hand. This program shows the fingerprints of a government that doesn't understand the experiences of victim survivors and is more concerned about rushing out a media release than getting it right, she said. Yeah, that sounded about right then and sounds about right today too. Sadly, it looks like Sarah Williams was right.
At the National Cabinet meeting and how that's going to do a lot of change. I'm sorry, but that's not going to do anything.
Independent Senator David Pocock also got up to speak at the rally. Unfortunately, what he said didn't get much coverage. But what he did say, I think, demonstrated that he'd at least listened to what people had been saying. He also demonstrated an understanding of the interconnectedness of the issues facing the country.
Clearly, this is not something that we can just change overnight, but we can change it, and we must change it. And it takes a commitment from all of us. And as we've heard, there are things that the government can and must be doing to step up, and they can be doing them now. I want to acknowledge the Prime Minister, the other ministers, local members who turned up. It's a big change from 3 years ago, from the rhetoric that we heard. One of the things I've seen in the Senate is the bipartisan nature and urgency when it comes to community safety, when, say, refugees are being released by the High Court. Absolute urgency in there. $250 million set aside for extra policing, for community safety. We need to see the same level of urgency when it comes to women's safety. We see hundreds of billions of dollars set aside for submarines, and at the same time, DVCS and other frontline services have their funding coming to an end in June with no certainty beyond that. You cannot tell me that this is an adequate response. We have to push the government to step up and actually provide long-term funding for frontline services as a minimum. Just finally, we know the link between poverty, insecurity, and family and domestic violence. Yes. Women wanting to leave, but not being able to for fear of poverty, of not having somewhere to live. Yes. Nowhere safe to go, not able to find a home through our frontline services. One thing the government could be doing is to raise the rate of single parent payments, of job seeker, of youth allowance.
Yes!
To actually look after Australians. We're an incredibly wealthy country, and we hear so much with the budget coming up about how the budget is about priorities. Well, let's prioritise Australians. Let's prioritise women in this budget. And we hear that there isn't money. At the same time, we're not willing to tax our gas companies. We sell our gas off we give it to them for free. This is about priorities, so thank you all so much for coming out today. I'll continue to push in there, but we need to see action from government.
I've seen people say that Sarah Williams should apologise to the PM, but really, what for exactly? She organised rallies attended by tens of thousands of Australians to demand immediate action to prevent violence against women. The government weren't willing to commit to immediate action and therefore they weren't on the speakers list. The PM then mishandled the situation on the day. The government then had the opportunity to redeem themselves out of the National Cabinet on Wednesday, but instead they rolled out a recycled Scott Morrison announcement that was big on optics and not a lot else. I mean, that's the whole thing in a nutshell. Sure that I'll get a heap of hate from some people over this video and that's fine. But I'll say this, if your first instinct is to pile on to a young person trying to make a positive change because your fearless leader walked away looking every bit as bad as Prime ScoMo, I think that probably says a lot about you as a person. The amount of people willing to check their humanity at the door to launch all sorts of attacks against a young woman to defend their dear leader has been disturbing and eye-opening to say the least. And we wonder why the country has a problem, eh? When National Cabinet meets again in 3 months, maybe this will all still be on the agenda. I wonder what policy they'll thaw out in 3 months' time. 1 woman killed every 4 days. 3 months. You do the maths.